Okay, so welcome back, Zan. Welcome back, everybody. I have a theme for today, which different kinds of men in our audience ask me about from time to time. And this is a lesson that you put in your classic essentials course, which I don't think we talk about very much, or I haven't seen much conversation about this topic for a long, long time. And the lesson simply is stop being so serious.
Huh.
And the question accompanying it is, how can I become more genuinely playful?
Okay.
Not as a front, right? Not trying to, oh, I'm going to try and make myself this extroverted um, mayor of the party and have that be a front. But how can I really actually become uh, much more genuinely playful in my interactions, in my way of moving through life?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's the general question, right? Um, I think we all know I'm certain we all know what it feels like to be playful when we're hanging with our buddies or with their girl and we're having a laugh. Um, so we have that innate in us, that ability to channel that little boy energy, which is fun. Um, I think where it goes sideways is when men are in the presence of something that they don't want to mess up,
Hmm.
right? So they become serious because there's this unspoken, un, untaught mindset that if we want to represent ourselves fully as being a viable option, we must be serious and grown up and take things seriously. That works if you're trying to get a job interview. If you're trying to get a job, right? You should be grown up and wear a suit and show up in your best shape. And we try and do that when it comes to women. And and I think that's wrong. You know, I think that you should be full of life, full of spark, full of adventure, have a twinkle in your eye, and have a lot of fun for yourself because that spills out to her, to all the people around. So we know what it is like. We know what being playful and cheeky is the word, cheeky bastard. Men need to channel their cheeky bastard energy and just like that little dimple here, that twinkle in their eye. And we do that naturally around women we're not thoroughly attracted to. We do that in the company of women. I'm not really my type, and we can relax. We have fun. We wink and nudge. We tell jokes. We tell dirty jokes. But if there's a woman that comes along and she's um, something that catches our eye, now we stiffen up. Like you always talk about embodiment and loosening up the body, and we stiffen up our throat, our face, our energy, our visage, our intentions. Everything's stiff, and we hide everything and we clamp it down underneath the mask, which everybody knows. I mean, this is talked about in this last 25 years of dating self-help. So it's I have that in the course. I think I have a video about it in the essentials course, which is basically, which we did a number of years ago. But the idea of the video is to show that we're hanging with this, and I wrote about it in the Alabaster Girl. We're hanging with our buddies, and we're telling dirty jokes. We're about to go out, and there's four of us in the room, and we're making fun of each other, punching each other on the arm, um, just being completely ribald, unfettered, youthful, exuberant young men, and we're waiting for our buddy. And then our buddy knocks on the door, and we open the door and let him in. Oh, and he brought with him a coworker who happens to be a pretty young woman. And he said, "You don't mind if I bring Sally here? She wanted to come out with us tonight." And all the guys who were joking, telling fart jokes, telling dirty jokes, laughing, winking at each other, as soon as she arrives on the scene, they downshift into this mature energy, and we just get caught up in our head, and we get serious, and all the fun drains out of the room, and we're like, "Yeah, nice to meet you. So, guys, where should we go tonight?" And we try and be cool, and because we don't want to show that we're not a mature, ready, available, pickable option for her, and all the guys do it, and except for the married guy. One of the guys married in the group. It's like, "Hey, what's your name? Come in here and hang out with us." And nothing changes in his energy. I was on a radio show years ago, and this woman said to me, "Why is it, do you think that women are always more attracted to married men?" And I said the pat answer, which I thought at the time, which I said, "Well, it's because they are unavailable. And so that makes them a bit more of a challenge. And so it's like a bit more." And she goes, "Maybe it's something else." And she's right. She said, "Maybe something else. Maybe it's because that married guy, he is more himself. He's going home to his wife, so he doesn't care so he's just more himself. He's more funny, more down to earth, more, less caring what she thinks." And I think that's valid. So if we were just the same guy when that pretty girl walks into the room with our friend, and we're just like, "Hey, I was right in the middle of a joke. Come here, you're going to love this one. What's your name again?" "Sally." "Hi, Sally. You're going to love this joke." And we kept that same energy. She'll fall right in with us. She'll be not nervous herself, and the playful energy will spill over onto her, and she'll be playful and welcomed and welcoming as well.
Cool. So, do you think you mentioned in there that there is this job interview mentality? Do you think it's quite as simple as we've got some grandmother's voice in our head saying, "Oh, you really want to make a first good impression," and that seizes us up, or and ends up conflating, the beautiful woman with a job interview scenario, or are there other things going on?
Well, I don't think it's we consciously, and I could be wrong in this. I haven't thought of it. But I don't think it's necessary that we're trying to make good impressions. It's just that we really don't want to. We're really afraid of our real self. We're really afraid to show. We put on a mask of propriety, I guess, and we don't want to be vulnerable by being that authentic self, because we think it's not good enough for her. So we just kind of seize up and dial ourselves down and act like we're not interested. So we get introduced. Hey guys, this is Sally. We reach out, shake hand. "Nice to meet you, Sally." Hey, we look around because we're aloof. We're trying to show that, hey, I'm not smitten by you. I don't want to show that because that's needy. We think it's needy, but it's not. True desire is not needy. Neediness is needy. So I think it's more like we're just really afraid to show what we really internally feel about ourselves to her, and so
Yeah.
we clam down.
I think this is getting closer. I think it's more a question of value, and when this kind of a presence walks into the room, I think typically a lot of men will project a high value on that, almost like royalty. So if you're laughing and scratching your butt and making these jokes, and King Charles walks in the room, it's like, one should put on special airs for royalty, right? And
Right.
my kind of plebeian, beer drinking and an alley humor is no longer appropriate. And I think and you said it, it's about worth. If you project that this woman coming in has a high sense of worth or value, you might therefore project on yourself create or feel into yourself, actually, no, I don't match that. And therefore I
Right.
definitely don't want to show what I truly have. And you try and give off this fumbled image of how can I increase my worth and make my own worth look like it's a match for that, which is a total energy drain.
Yeah, I think it's all those nuances and layers that complicate everything and shutter everything down. And it's subconscious. We don't even know we're doing it. We might have done it when we were younger. But we're afraid to be the greatest. The greatest men in history are unfiltered, in my mind. They are unfiltered. They are congruent to the core. They have no guile in them. They just say things. They blurt. The other thing we have in our course, the essentials course, is that they blurt. They if they think of something funny to say, they blurt it out. They don't think, well, would they think it's funny? Should I? And then the moment's passed. How many guys listen to this, bite their tongue when they're in a group of people and they think of something interesting to add to the conversation or something funny to say, and instead of immediately blurting it out, which is the practice we say to do, they bite their tongue and think, well, maybe time's not appropriate, or they won't think it's funny. And in that 2 seconds of hesitation, the moment's passed and the conversation moved to something else. And it happens all the time to men. So unfiltered and congruent, just authentic to the core. And authentic is a word we overuse. So, but what I mean is, what you see is what you get. They're not trying to, they're not, what you see is what you get. They speak their truth. If they like you, they say it. Hey, if Sally comes in, hey, Sally, you're pretty. Come hang out with us. They say it.
So you've given in a way, a perfect world example. I mean, it's it's pretty difficult. I mean, it's not a perfect world if you're trapped in this thing. You're having a laugh with your buddies, and a woman walks in, and you seize up, and you lose your playfulness. But it's almost like, all things being equal in a man's life, he is actually going to be playful and have a good sense of humor and a good connection with all of his buddies and a lot of women that he's not attracted to. And then the woman he is attracted to comes in, and he loses that, right? But I know for sure that a lot of the men that come to us over the years are, I would say, suffering with a more chronic alienation from their own playful spirit.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
they've forgotten how to have fun. Yeah.
So on the younger end of the spectrum, it's a bit like, God, I don't know how to have fun, and anything that I might say might be so embarrassing that I'll not share anything at all, even with buddies, even with women, let's say, I'm not attracted to, let alone the one I'm really attracted to. So I think there is like I remember having some of this myself, like the young person shame, which is anything that I may say to the world might be ridiculed from any angle. And the only safe thing to do is quite compress myself quite a lot. So the opportunities to get to know yourself as playful or joke or even have any buddies with this kind of humor with is already quite thin, right? I think many young men have to spend quite a long time to come into themselves, to find a certain acceptance, even to let their humor start coming out. And I see that among a lot of the younger men. And then on the other end of the spectrum, let's say you got a guy mid-30s and above, all the way up through his 60s. What can happen here is a man's body gets encrusted to the point of rigidity because of his own inner sense of burden, which is, boy, I'd love to have a few drinks and shoot the shit. And I remember what that was like. But literally, I've become a soldier to my own obligations. And I'm so exhausted from doing that, I don't even remember what a good laugh is like. And I think you see in a lot of the more older men that the shaping of their responsibility has kind of stuffed them up to a point where relaxing and having a laugh or sharing some joke as it is quite a far stretch from where they are. And I think that's a question of stress, actually. It's hard if I'm stressed about a few things, it's hard for me then to have a laugh and be playful, even though I might naturally be funny or playful. It's hard to do that when I'm
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
I got to deliver this by Friday, or there's a million things on my to-do list.
Yeah. I mean, like there's a couple layers of different iterations of stress, and the stress could be like I got to deliver this by Friday, like you said, or by the weekend. And so I don't have time to just let my hair down and relax, which is not a bad stress. The bad stress is the one of the heaviness of the burden of life, like you alluded to, that he's 35 to 6 years old, and there's been complications, um, family, health, whatever, work,
Or
career.
I'm coming out of a 10-year marriage, and the
Oh,
last eight
yeah,
years of that
yeah,
last 8 years of that marriage were a strain and a burden, and I was chronically suffering throughout this with no outlet.
yes,
How do I now wipe off the last 8 years, which the rigidity of my own being has kind of stuck around all those inner feelings that were so difficult. So what I'm asking is, like, not how do I have cultivate a sense of play, but how do I cultivate a sense of playfulness, given I'm coming from such a chronic situation, which is beyond, I can't just turn it on of a moment.
yeah. I guess it's recultivated because we had it at one point. We remember those days when we were like cheeky little bastards, and then the weight of the world and 10-year destructive, moribund relationship or marriage just kind of sapped their energy for years, sapped their life force, which it can do. Um, and so now they've got to try and revive and come out of that. I mean, that's what you're saying. It goes back to what I talked about in probably every other one of these episodes that we've done, which is this perspective of choice, or choice of perspective, which is to say, simply, this is my life. I'm here now. I'm 45 years old. I was in a 10-year terrible marriage. I'm coming out of that. I've spilled out of it like a spillway, and I'm falling forwards, falling out of it. And I'm trying to get my bearings. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my mojo is. I don't know if I'm still attractive to women, which is a very real thing. And where do I go? Do I, I met my wife, my girlfriend, and became my wife. I met her in church. Do I go to clubs now? Do I go on Tinder? Do I how the heck am I going to find somebody? I'm 45 years old. So we flail around in different energies and different directions. We hang out with our buddies. We commiserate. We try and sort it out. But we have this heaviness, which is not our fault, that's layered over top of us. And I just go back to what I've always said: choice of perspective. We can choose a new perspective. You can't choose your circumstances. You might be in jail for the next 20 years. That's a circumstance you can't control, but you can control the perspective of the way your mind is thinking by the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, and by conscious, contemplative, purposeful choice. And so you can say, you're 45 years old, you can say, okay, well, I suck and I got a paunch now and women are not going to be attracted to me, which is a choice of perspective. Or you can say, I'm 45, I got another 45 years in me. I'm still got some vitality, and I've still got, and I would like to have a great relationship with a great woman, and I'm going to go forth and try and construct that. And I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose a lightness in my heart. Is that possible? Yeah. To choose it. Yeah. Because here's the thing, everybody's weighed down by the burden of life, including all the women you're going to meet. They've had traumatic pasts or drama in their last relationship, and they're wondering about their forward momentum too. And if they're still desirable, And so you're not unique. Everybody's got this heaviness. The world is a dismal place, and it's crowds in on you. The stress you talked about, career, trouble, and it crowds in on you. And there's only a few, and and you remember them, storied individuals, men or women, that just say, I'm going to shake off that heaviness. I'm still burdened. Like I still have to deal with this situation, and I still have to try and solve this problem that's forthcoming, that's looming in my calendar here. I got to solve this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea. But I'm going to wake up with a song in my heart by choice and gratitude. I'm going to reclaim my viewpoint as one of gratitude. I'm going to layer gratitude over top of my existence, as opposed to misery over top of my existence. The misery is there. I'm burdened, but I'm going to choose gratitude and look up and see what I can be grateful for and thankful for. So I mean, I'm saying a lot, but
when you came out of your corporate life, you were about 40, from what I remember.
Yep.
Did you ever get to the stage where stress, burden, responsibility had built up so that it, really became an inhibitor for your joy of life, your sense of playfulness?
You when I was in the corporate world? No, because I had a remarkable ability to completely compartmentalize my work life and my not work life. So I would do 60 hours. I was an executive, and I would do 60 hours in the office. But when I went home, man, when I left there, that place was gone. And I said, okay, it's a dual life, really, living a dual existence, because my work, I was very um, um, professional and, clean cut and the whole thing. But as soon as I get out of there, man, that was gone, and my real life began. Was what I would feel like. That was to get me some money,
Yeah.
so that I could do this.
That's really interesting, because a lot of people don't have a dual life. The career is the identity.
Yeah.
So when they leave the office at the end of the day, the troubles of the office are still with them as they fall asleep or they go out at night. And the logical choice is, well, I'm not going to go out and have that glass of wine or do that fun thing or see my buddies, because it's going to affect my game tomorrow morning and I have to stay on it.
Yeah, I mean, I had that too. You have, meetings and deadlines that you have to deal, and it'd be better for you to just stay in tonight than to. But man, that world didn't exist for me mostly. Like I just like my bosses would say, the boss, the president, he would say, well, we better be. I remember, I'll tell this story. I went a trip to Europe with the company I was with, and I was a young executive guy, and I went on a trip to Europe, to Denmark, Vienna, Milan, Hamburg, and we went on this trip to do some corporate meetings with associates. And the president said, "Okay, well, listen, you're my attaché. Let's go. You can be my aide de camp, my chief of staff, and let's go." And so I planned the trip and had it all set out. And I never said this before to anybody. We got there and we landed in Vienna first. And I remember thinking, man, here I am in a city. And he's like, okay, well, we need to go over these reports over breakfast. So we have our meeting tomorrow. And so we should analyze this and take a look at the papers, and I'll see you in the morning for breakfast. And I'm like, I go to my room, gone. I was out the door, man. I'm in Vienna. I went out and I'm partying and seeing the nightlife, and just like my eyes wide open, ignoring the report, which is not a good thing to do. Don't listen to me, guys. Just not what would Zan do. And I'd come for breakfast, and I was prepared anyway, because I'm a quick study, and I can, so I'd sit there over breakfast. And this happened for 3 or 4 days in Vienna. The next trip was going to be to Milan. and then to Hamburg, Hanover, and Copenhagen. And after about 5 days of this, and I was just in my evening, just gone. After about 5 days of this, I was on top of it. I was doing it well. He came to breakfast one day. He says, "By the way, I'm flying back to Canada today, and you're staying. You're going to finish the trip without me." I'm like, "Huh?" Because I was just the kind of the mentor or the helper, right? And he said, "You're going to finish the trip without me because I just sold the company. I sold this division, this Canadian division, and so I'm going back to take care of this deal. You finish the trip. None of it's necessary anymore. These deals are going to be, but out of courtesy, go meet all these people. Here's a corporate company. Here's a corporate
Incredible.
credit card." And I remember I flew to Milan. It was the next part of the trip, and I couldn't find the address because he had all the details. So I just gave up. And I just wandered around Milan. I wandered around Hanover. Wandered around Hamburg. I wandered around Copenhagen. Wandered around London for 3 weeks, and then I went back to Canada because I couldn't follow up on any that he left me with nothing. But anyway, I can't remember the point of my story. But basically, it was like, was I corporately heavy? And I always separated my work from my life. So it was I was scared to leave because had this poverty mentality since I was a kid. I was afraid to leave this corporation and leave my corporate life and my executive life. And it was a really hard thing for me to do, to give that up and to go into nothing, to go into enlightened seduction is what I went into back in the day.
So it was really hard to make that jump.
Oh my goodness, Jordan! I gave 2 months notice to the company. Now it was owned by the Japanese. We sold it to the Japanese. And so this Japanese corporation, big mega corporation that owned it, the executives, they loved me. They said, "You're going to be the next president of this division. So get ready." But my heart wasn't there. Like I would be sitting in my office with my monitors all around me. I was in charge of the IT department. I was in charge of the commodities department. And I would sit there and I'd look at the calendar, and I remember seeing the calendar. I can still see it, which was these grass huts and blue clear water and some kind of a canoeish type thing. It was, I don't know, it was Bali or someplace in Thailand or Phuket or something like that. And I'm looking at this and thinking, here I am in this Canadian winter, sitting here 60 hours a week, laden down with this, and there's a whole world out there that I don't get to explore year after year after year after year. And so I gave 2 months notice because, to the company, I was trying to be courteous, 2 months notice that I'm going to quit. And I remember that 2 months, Jordan, I laid in this is instructive for guys who want to know if they should continue or not. I gave a formal letter, 2 months notice. In that 2 months, every night I would lie in my bed on my back, looking at the ceiling like this with tears coming out of my eyes. Because what did I just do? I was so mortified that I gave up my job security, the benefits, pension, the whole thing, to go into nothing. I didn't have a job to go to. I was going to try and wing it, And in that 2 months, I sold my apartment, got rid of all my possessions, gave them away. I didn't sell anything. I just gave it away to ex-girlfriends and my brother and stuff like that. And I quit into nothing. And I was so afraid. But what's interesting, and this is off the topic maybe, but it's interesting. From that day on, and I was at that company for many years. It was 60 hours of my life every week. It was overall overarching my whole existence. And from the day I left till now, I never ever thought about that company again or my time there, unless I'm mentioning it to somebody like you, unless I'm talking about it. It never came into my dreams, never came into my mind. It was like it was something that happened to somebody else, and I went and I was afraid. but I did it anyway because I had to see what I'm made of. Like I said, I was 40. And I had to see, is this it? I have to find out what is the measure of a man. I had to know. So I quit into nothing, and I said, I'm just, Casanova did it. He went from city to city with no safety net, no bank machine, no money, not sure what he's going to do, but just trusting in his ability to wing it and make it work, and he'd be okay. And I did that for all these years, and here I am now in Romania. So
I haven't heard you. I mean, I've heard you tell that story a few times, but never to the extent of you had tears coming out of your eyes for 2 months, and the level, I guess, of. I mean, it sounded traumatic in a way. To,
it was.
I'm not dramatizing with that word, because I know
Yeah.
it sounds like you blew those feelings off, but in the purgatory between decision and actually leaving,
Yeah.
that sounds really intense.
Well, the thing is, Jordan, is like I had no clue if I was doing the right thing. I couldn't get a measure of that. And the only thing I could get an idea of is what I learned, what I wrote in the book, The Alabaster Girl, is your gut is always right. Your mind is a great um, it tries to be the boss, and your mind is a great analyst, but it's a terrible boss to follow your mind all the time. And your intuition, that still small voice, that twinge you get, is always accurate. So I said, you know what? My gut said I had to do this, and I don't know where I'm going. I didn't know what I was going to face. I had no plan at all. And I had no money. When I quit the corporate job, I liquidated my apartment, all my possessions of that, and I paid off all my credit cards, my mortgage, down to nothing. I had nothing. I reduced myself to a carry-on bag and one pair of shoes. And I hit the road and said, you know what? I'll do this or die trying. I'm going to figure it out. So, but I had no certainty. And for years and years and years, as I was traveling with Hans, I was doing light seduction and then Ars Morada. We would have a one-way ticket, as you know. I mean, I'm speaking to the choir here. As you know, you would go with maybe a month's worth of money hanging around in your bank account, but you just trusted, as Casanova said, I trusted to the wind, whichever way it led me. It just relaxed into the arms of life, is what he said, and trusted it. Your bread and water will be sure, says the Bible, if you're following your path, And so I just I trusted it, and I've done it ever since. And I went for years with no idea where I'm going to be in 3 months at all.
So back to the original question, which is how to stop being so serious, or how to develop one's playfulness. I mean, quitting your corporate career could go into radical directions. The first is all of a sudden you really find a sense of playfulness because you've got this burden or this corporate identity off your shoulders. You've freed up 60 hours a week. So one could be very lighthearted and naturally playful after such a change. But it could go on the other side of the spectrum, which is, God, I had all this future and now I don't. What the hell am I doing? And that could actually put you in more of a sense of stress and responsibility, that you've got no protective
Right.
structure around your livelihood. Yeah. And that could dampen actually your playfulness. Did you notice an instant difference in your spirit after the first month or two, after the first year or so, from making this big change and trusting your gut, like following your gut's calling, the soul's whisper, as you kind of say?
Yeah, there's two burdens or two things that overcast us. One is, which I had at the corporate job, is, security is a kind of death. It really is, like it's a security. If I've said in my talks over the years, if you really want security, go out and commit some major crime. You'll get maximum security, right? You get maximum security. You have
Right.
meals. You don't worry about medical costs. Rent is paid. um, so you have that layer of constricted energy of security that keeps you small, which I was looking at the calendar and thinking this security is a burden to me. It's secure, and I had good pay, man, and I was set up. They're grooming me to be the president of that division, so I'd still be the president today. And or the other side of that, like the flip side you're talking about, which is this not non-security, and then the layer of constriction on that is the fear of the future and how am I going to provide for a family, or what am I going to do in the future? Like, how am I going to sort this out? I don't want to be like, begging on the street. And so we got that fear of the unknown that way. But you trade one soft, compliant, nodding your head, meeting generating, secure guy to freedom seeking, maybe even desperation traveling, seat of your pants. But that second guy, that's where the fun is. That's the wow, did I just make it through that? I just can't believe and I had some close calls as you did, in my travels. And you think, wow, and you have a story to tell. What I said in the Alabaster Girl is when you face with a fork in the road, which I was when I was, 40, and you can go left, you can go right. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by. Okay, that kind of thing. That has made all the difference. You have this diversion in the woods, left or right, in your life. Always take the path that will give you the best memories. Not the one that's financially secure, not the ones your family and friends say, oh, you should do this. What do you think your gut is saying would give you the best memories when you're old? Because when you're old, and we know this, all of the things, the cars you bought, the raise you got at work, the job promotion, none of that's going to matter when you're old, laying on your deathbed. You're just going to have memories. So your whole guide in life should be your future self. I said it before. And ask your future self, what did I do at this point, this junction, to get to where you are, and give me this incredible sense of story and memories and remembrances and cool things to share around the fire. What gave me the best memories? What choice did I make to give me the best memories? Because that's all you're going to have when you're old. So,
one of my we talk a lot about ease and delight in our group, and something I'm quite convinced about is if you want to have real ease and delight, because you can pretend ease and delight in a number of different ways, but if you want the real stuff that's very true and stays with you, what one must explore the darkness, or the dark forest, as you call it, which is the darkness within oneself.
yeah, you scare yourself.
The truth about your fear, your terror, your the secrets, your shame, your sexual desire, your anger, your resentment. One must look at all those things, but also look at the dark things that happen in the world, or have some dark encounter with the world. And then it's like, well, if you've faced some real difficulty and some hardship, the shift in perspective is so huge that when you come back into your general home environment, everything's very funny. And the things that stress or upset the conventional folk that never left the Shire, let's say, all seem very comical to you. Because it's like, wow, if I can survive in this hardship, or if I can get through some of the scrapes that I've been in, and if I can face my own internal kind of emotional existential darkness, and then come home to the Shire, and someone's upset because their Amazon delivery is two days late, or they got the wrong thing, or the football team lost and now they're not going to speak to their wife for the rest of the night because they took it so personally. Like how ridiculous the things that stress people out seem all of a sudden, right? It's the ultimate recontextualizer to go out and live maybe one's true life.
Yeah, the old saying, many are called, few are chosen, and it's only a few that will ever strike out and try and make something of themselves and buck the trend and go against what society says. Some are called to sweet delight, some are called to endless night. And I mean, I think of, like, I always talk about Bill, my old friend. He was 85 when I first met him. He was 95 in Ottawa, and his wife had died, his beloved wife, Patricia. And I used to visit. I do things like I go visiting. I fly across the world just to see somebody for a couple of days, and I would go visit Bill, and he had lived his whole life. I talked about him before. A magnificent Casanova. He banged every girl in sight. He was married 4 or 5 times. His last wife, Patricia, he was with for 20 years, last 20 years of life, and he adored her. He just was in love with her and really, really, really admired this woman. And she died, and he was now relegated to an old folks home in Ottawa. And the reason was because he was a veteran, and he was in Vietnam War, and he was in World War II, I think, and then when he was very young. And now he's in this old folks home, which is a military. It's for veterans, this old folks home for veterans. And I went to visit him 3 or 4 times this last year before he died in this remote, small little VA hospital or rest home. And that ebullient, exhilarating, effervescent life that he lived, and all the things he did and possessed, that he was this executive, and he worked for the government of Canada, and he did all kinds of things for the Olympics, and all of these things that he had, and all these accomplishments, and he spoke 11 languages. And he's reduced now at 95 to this single room, this size of a small hospital room, with a bed that goes, and outside the room was a little corner triangle glass-faced cabinet, floor to ceiling, that had a picture of him and his wife when he was young. It had his medals from Vietnam War or whatever. He had these different, just little kind of keepsakes from his life, mementos and souvenirs from his life. And in his room, he had nothing. He didn't even have clothes. He just wore the hospital clothes. He laid in his bed. He'd get on his chair and he'd do crossword puzzles. He had nothing but those mementos outside his room. And I thought, man, we're reduced to that at the end. There's nothing. Nobody remembers his accomplishments or what he went through. I do. So it's like, and I remember thinking, that's going to be me, and I'm going to be reduced to whatever, like, trinkets of my life. So I want to make sure that I'm like Casanova. He wrote 11 years. He wrote his memoirs, the last 11 years of his life. And he said, writing my memories, my memoir, these stories gives me as much pleasure as when I lived it. It returns that to me. And I said, I want to have a life like that. I want to have a life that has that fun sense of forward momentum and just pure sense of joy and delight. And yeah, I did that. Did I do that? Yeah, I did that. And wow. And also that. And I want to be able to have these memories when I'm old, so I can look back and say, wow, what a path I went. And I didn't have that in the corporate world. So the beginning of this conversation is about how to reclaim that playful, fun energy.
Yeah.
And I think everything I said is along the lines of heading back to that, rejuvenating that young part of yourself that feels like the wind is in your hair, the sun is shining. There's all kinds of troubles in this world, but I'm going to go out there and be a treasure hunter and seek and see what's beyond the horizon, see what's beyond those hills. I want to go look down in the other. Is there another valley over there? I want to look, climb the mountain, look in the other valley, and Bill represented that. So, like, when I say he was reduced to the small little hospital type room with nothing of his life left except these trinkets, a couple of photographs. his spirit was undiminished. That man, he's 95. He's all alone. And I would go visit him occasionally. I'd fly from Romania to go visit him. And he'd be happy and he'd be smiling and he'd look at me. And never once was he down or, discouraged or thinking that's okay, because he had his memories. He had this life he lived, and he had that twinkle in his eye still. And he missed his wife Patricia immensely, but he remembered her with fondness. There's a fondness about his life. He's fond about what he created for himself, and he's delighted that he did all that. And there's no regret in that man. So I've said regret is a sin. I mean, I keep going, but
well, I'm glad that you pulled the conversation back to the beginning, because this episode is how to regain your playfulness, and the conversation is actually very contemplative and deep. And you've met a number of men, Emirati students, clients that have gone through things like comedy training, improv, circus skills, you name it, to become more fun, right? To become more of a uplifting presence. But today you're talking about this claiming of one's absolute freedom despite all the costs. And is it the right word? Kind of gambling, like taking bold bets with the choices of your life as being some kind of route to playfulness or a reclamation of one's spirit.
Well, certainly. I mean, it challenges you, and you get assaulted by the earth, because you've got to. It's you. You've got to take care of things now. You've got to dig into your existential bag of tricks and make it work. You got to make this work somehow. You don't have security, you don't have a job, whatever, right? If you have this sense of seeking a metaphysical adventure through life, and you want your life to be construed and viewed by yourself as a narrative story, a mythic journey, a hero's quest. You say, I want to have this kind of hero's quest type of feel when I'm old. I want to look back and say, man, I tried to go and find the treasure, the pearl of great price. I went and looked for the pearl of great price. And if you're trying to create a life like that, and that's your vision, that's your contemplative moment of pausing, the Emirati ritual we talk about in our course, in our membership, this pausing sense of perspective choosing, and saying, I don't know how I'm going to get to where I see my vision, but I have the vision. That's good enough. I have it. Then something changes in you, and there is a lightness in your step. There is a twinkle in your eye. There's a cheeky little bastard energy that flows off of you. You become more, what we're the whole theme of this podcast, which is you become more little boy energy, a bit more fun, a bit more mischievous, a bit more playful. It becomes because you're caught up in something mystical that's cool, that you're curious about, that you're heading toward, as opposed to plodding through your day and trying to, my boss will be mad at me tomorrow. I'm not saying you should quit your jobs, but that spirit should be chosen no matter what it is you're doing. That conscious choice of saying, you know what, one of these days I'm going to be sick. One of these days I'm going to be dead, and I'm not yet. So I'm going to honor the vitality that I still have, and I'm going to try and see what I'm made of and try and make good memories. And that decision automatically makes you more playful, more in your body, more authentic, more congruent, less trying to be stiffen up when the girl walks in the room, because you'll look at her as, okay, I know what I'm heading towards, a mystical future that I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I want to have this great memories. When she walks into the room, Sally walks into the room, you think, is this part of my journey? Because it sure looks like it. I like her. It looks like she's part of my journey. I hope she is. And you head down that with that delight and curiosity and potentiality and wonder wonderment,
I think we've got to really prize apart what you've just said about taking the decision to move with delight and have a sense of fun from the kind of mythical hero's journey that we're talking about, because we have many men who are fully wandering souls, absolutely committed and fiercely living their freedom. And that's a serious act for them. And there isn't the reprieve from the existential wondering, the sense of terror, the like, I've really got to struggle and keep this freedom. There isn't that sense of lightness. So I get what you're saying, but I think it's important to say, as I go on this path, or as I move into life, I am going to choose a sense of fun. And I think it boils back to a sense of humor, like really choosing to understand what a sense of humor is for you. Because there are, just to repeat it, I think we both know some real wandering souls that don't, at the end of the day, and this is not a character blemish, I think it's a consequence of having, I don't know, such a serious perspective towards life, or stress, or sense of obligation, that seriousness can be almost total. And then a
even
sense
if you're
of
on an
humor,
adventure.
even those that are on an adventure.
Well, whimsy, we've got to capture whimsy, the fairy tale energy. We listened to fairy tales when we were children, and we had a whimsical look at the world. And I think we need to really go back to that, or try and reclaim that sense of whimsy and whimsical flightiness, I guess you could say. And a sense of humor is if we're so afraid to self-deprecate with our humor. We make fun of other people. We think that's humorous. But the really charming and enigmatic, cool people that we know are the ones that make fun of themselves. Not in a Woody Allen hangdog, like I suck type of way, but just make fun of himself. Cary Grant is an example. He was quintessentially articulate and fashionable and well dressed and stuff like that. Hair just perfect as that. But he made fun of himself all the time. They said to him, hey, Cary Grant, how do you get these women so attracted to you? He says, I tell them I can't get it up. That's self-deprecating, and it's funny, and there's a truth to it, because women go, wait a minute, I can get you up. And at the same time, he invented that. Cary Grant's a good example. He was born Archibald Leach, and he was a Cockney. He had a strong Cockney accent, and he recreated himself by choice. He was a poor, shoeless young man growing up in rural England, and with a thick accent that nobody could understand. And he reinvented his accent into the mid-transatlantic, accent that they had back in the day. Talk like this, and learned to be fashionable by choice. Changed his name to Cary Grant by choice. He said, I'm going to sort this out. I'm going to figure it out whatever I can. And no longer Archibald Leach and with the thick accent, and he recreated it. And then he even knew the perspective of that he said this. He said, everybody wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant. I would like to be him too. So he knew that there was an image that was portrayed, but he had a fun, winking energy underneath it all, made fun of himself in real life and in his movies. And it's a spirit of, we're drawn to that. We're not drawn to some guys are strong silent types. I'm not saying that's wrong, but there's still a whimsy, there's still a twinkle in the eye that you might not be gregarious and talking a lot and jumping around, which maybe I do. Maybe I'm clownish that way. I don't know. But you could be the strong silent type, but you still have that sense of wonderment in your eyes. And when you look across the room and you catch an eye of a woman, she can feel that. So that's important.
What what I'm reflecting on, I know your video froze up for a minute, but it sounds like one needs a space where they're absolutely free for themselves, free from themselves. So wherever you are in your life, or what's going on, or the level of stress there, one needs a perspective where they are self-aware in a way that they can transcend their normal struggles and strife and self-concept, and from there have a perspective. That's where I think humor comes from. So we had, and this is a really particular example, but in England we had this snooker player called Steve Davis. And he rose and became world champion, like multiple times world champion in the 1980s. And then he would do his post game interview on his snooker. How was the snooker for you? What was it like? Potting those balls in the heat of the battle and the height of the challenge. And he became widely known in England as the most boring person on TV, or the most boring celebrity ever, right? Someone who could break down the game of snooker into its logical components and speak entirely rational about his game. And I think at some point in the 90s, he was invited on all these different talk shows, and he developed this sense of humor, which was the man who became aware that he was known publicly as the most boring person in Britain. And as he became self-aware of the perspective that everyone had of him, all of a sudden he kind of eked out this dry sense of humor, which was absolutely brilliant, because he became the first butt of all of his jokes. And then beyond that, he had freedom to talk about anything with the same detachment. So I've talked about this when I did the program LOTM. One of the archetypes was the trickster. And a lot of people couldn't understand the trickster. And the reason I chose it, the original name for that course was Lover, Pirate, Scoundrel, Magician, because I was riffing on the 4 archetypes that I think that you use most to describe the Amorati. And I reflected on this. I took a long walk on the beach, and I was looking out. This is in Bali, watching the waves come in, and I was like, pirate's a very thin archetype, actually. Pirate is great and powerful for many things, but it's only one archetype within a broader family called outlaw.
That's right.
And if you can understand what outlaw energy means in you and in your own psyche, well, the pirate's one choice within that, but you've also got the motorcycle rebel. You've got all kinds of archetypal bad boys and outcasts and rebels and people that claim their value and say no to the normal way, right? They can break with the conventional stew and have the power to set boundaries and set out on their own. And I thought the same with scoundrel. Like, scoundrel is a small stripe of a larger archetype, which is the trickster.
Right.
And what you get with the trickster, and you see this best in the kind of holy madmen, like the real left field gurus that some of them get in trouble, but like whack their students with a stick or so on, or like they pull the rug from underneath everyone that they're interfacing with. And the idea is that I hit you with such a non sequitur, your general mindset can't compute what's going on, and that within itself is hilarious but also transformative.
Right.
So the trickster is the one within us that's like, before our regular thinking mind or the ego kicks in, there is a little bit of a space. And if you can occupy that space, I think that's where real humor comes through.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's Loki in Nordic culture, and then Coyote in North American Native culture. For certain. I mean, like, that playful trickster is a good way of saying it. I mean, trickster maybe has a little bit of a connotation of being a deceptor. Maybe trickster, scoundrel. I mean,
scoundrel, definitely.
Yeah, they're all bad, but not really. They all on the surface and on the face of it look bad, but the sparkle of it, the fun cheekiness of it is not bad at all.
There is a positive function, which is you are stuck in a serious way of perceiving yourself and the world and going through life, and I'm gonna rip that down, or I'm gonna dissolve it, or I'm gonna go around the back and pull your pants down or something surprising. But the idea is to derobe your self-conceit. And then you stood there naked, and you might actually get really threatening and angry about that. But the invitation is to step outside of your stuckness.
That's right. Yeah.
I think some of the best thing, again, this is like such a serious answer for how do you become more playful. But if, we did this practice before, which is to sit in a circle and then invite everyone's feedback. Zan, this is how I see you, or this is how I feel you, or whatever it is, right? It's extremely challenging to be on the hot seat and listen to what other people think of you. But if you can burn in their opinions, all of a sudden, the things that you're afraid that other people are going to say of you are no longer scary because you've received the worst feedback about yourself. And now you can own them all. Oh, wow. You're trying to be so serious, or you're trying to be grandiose, or you're trying to be the deep one, or whatever it is. Like you have a sense of your own self-conceit, and you can make fun of that. Right. The same as the snooker player example.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, exactly. And it reclaims then, rejuvenates the childishness, the childish spirit, and the sense of fun and wonderment that you had when you were very young, which is where it's got to go. Even if you're the strong silent type, you still have to have that sense of mischief.
Yeah, you know that you're the strong silent type. You know that can actually be a little rigid or boring or something like that, and you can laugh at yourself. Here I am being strong and silent on the side of the bar, doing the same old thing again. Okay, but I'm gonna, like, that self-awareness brings a little bit of a smile, and now I'm gonna look across the room, knowing that I have this power, actually, that I have.
Yeah.
I have this power, but I don't take it so seriously.
And the strong silent type's good. I don't do a lot of talking. Like, if I'm in a lounge or bar with you and I see a woman, I don't talk. I just look. It was a whole new subject, communication. My opening line a lot of times is silence. Don't say anything. Just communicate with my eyes, my smile. I'm completely silent a lot of times.
And then the secret that I've gathered from a lot of strong silent types is they are secretly a teddy bear. and they will disclose that secret to the
right people,
the woman who's ready to see that, or the people that are ready to see that.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts on the topic?
No, good topic though. I hope that we had a glitch in the recording, so hopefully it'll all record properly. There's some construction happening outside too, so no final thoughts from me. I think you kind of said it.
I've spoken before about the body, and you mentioned earlier on that we can clutch, right? The beautiful woman comes in, or there is a stressful thing in life that happens, and we clutch, and that stops the playfulness and the fun.
Yeah.
And we take things seriously when we're not accepting them, when we're trying to control them. If you're interested in the body approach, I would type in Osho dynamic meditation into YouTube from the 1970s.
Huh.
And so Osho was very much a kind of a trickster and a magician type. The Indian guru with the 40 Rolls Royces and these big
wasn't he
rings
Maharishi?
and the giant beard. He was Rajneesh. Yeah, before he had to rebrand himself through scandal.
Got kicked out of the
being
States,
kicked out of America. This guy had quite a life, and he has some really good documentaries about the underbelly of his cult, right? But in the peak of it, his insight, and he got a lot of this actually from Western body psychotherapy. His insight was for Western people, because we're so rigid, and he was working in America in the post kind of, in the 60s and the 70s, like helping people come out of this rigid GI generation thing.
Yeah.
He would have people jump up and down for hours and hours and hours, or dance to this crazy music, kind of with their hands in the air, until their body just tired from all of the holding it was doing.
Right.
And they would end up in a puddle on the floor, either a puddle of laughter, or a puddle of grief, or a puddle of orgasm. But watching these videos is not, you see a thousand kind of white Americans in orange robes with long hippie hair, and they're so like wanting to do the jumping in a really good way and jump and get it right. And at some point the body tires actually from all this seriousness. It's like, hold and be serious, and then boom, you let go, and all the seriousness is released in that release. But then you go through the thing is next. And it's not always laughter. It typically ends in laughter, but the next thing might be breaking down to all of the sorrow that your seriousness has been holding within. Anyway.
Okay, Jordan.
See you next time.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. Questions and comments as always. And we will put a link up to the membership. Join if you haven't, and you get many things, including Zan's Classic Essentials course.
Live calls with us.
And information about how to join us also in Bucharest for the conference.
For the conference twice a year, yeah. Coming up. Time to record this, we've got one coming up in 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So, okay, thank you, Jordan.
All right. Thanks, Zan.